Welcome to the November 1st meeting of the Mobile City Planning Commission. I would like to take a moment to review our general operating procedures. Our meeting is divided into two sessions, the public hearing session and the deliberation session. In the public hearing session, an application or group application on the agenda is called. The applicant makes his or her presentation. Commission members ask questions, if any. Members of the public make their comments. Only 4 people may speak for an agenda item project and 4 against. Each speaker is limited to 5 minutes, subject to questions by the commission. After 4 minutes, a loud beep will indicate 1 minute left to speak. And at this point, please summarize your comments. After all opposition speakers have finished, the applicant will be given time to respond. If you do intend to speak, please come to the podium, speak into the microphone, and give your name and address for our minutes. Please direct all comments to the commission only and not to the applicant or the audience, and please remember to speak directly into the microphone. On routine applications, the applicant may simply raise his or her hand if there are no objections to staff recommendations. I will then announce that the applicant is in full agreement with those recommendations. If there are any questions, the applicant will be given an opportunity to respond. After hearing all applications, the commission will go into the deliberation session. In the deliberation session, the commissioners discuss each application with input from the staff as necessary, but with no input from the audience. The commissioners then vote on each application, and results of the voting can be learned from the planning department. If some issue arise in the deliberation session that were not addressed in the public hearing, the chairman has the discretion either to allow additional comments pertaining to those issues in order to resolve them, or call for application to be held over for discussion at a future meeting. Occasionally, one or more commission members may recuse themselves from discussing and voting on a given application. A recusal does not necessarily mean the member is directly involved with the application or the applicant. Depending upon the circumstances, ethical rules may require a recusal when there is only the slightest appearance of a conflict of interest. If a regular member recuses, a supernumerary will vote in their stead unless both supernumeraries are already voting due to absences. The Planning Commission makes final decisions subject to appeal on subdivisions, planning approvals, plan unit developments, PUDs. The Planning Commission only makes recommendations on zoning applications, with the City Council making the final decisions. Please turn off all cell phones at this time. Commissioners and staff, please remember to turn on your microphone when speaking. Roll call, Ms. Libby Latham. Here. Ms. Jennifer Denson. Here. Mr. John Vallis. Here. Ms. Shirley Sessions. Here. Mr. Alan Cameron. Mr. Taylor Atchison. Here. Mr. Matt Anders. Here. Mr. Nick Omberger. Ms. Bess Rich. Here. Mr. Dunbury. Here. Mr. Cart Blackwell. Here. So we quorum. We'll now enter our public phase. Item number 1 under the holdovers.
Mr. Chairman, the agent emailed the staff yesterday and stated that they were withdrawing the application.
Okay. Item number 1 has been withdrawn. New subdivision applications. Item number 2, Southeast Corner, Halls Mill Road and Alden Drive, Sheldon Place subdivision, recommended for tentative approval. Is applicant present? In agreement with staff recommendations? Yes. Applicant is present and in agreement. Is there anyone else here to speak for this? Anyone here to speak against? Thank you. Item number 3, 213 and 219 Dolphin Street and 208 Conti, Woolworth Building subdivision. Application is recommended for tentative approval. Applicant present. Are you in agreement with staff recommendations? Yes, sir. Applicant is present and in agreement. Is there anyone else here to speak for this? Anyone here to speak against? Item number 4, northeast corner of US Highway 90 West and McDonald Road, Skyview Point subdivision, re-subdivision of Lot 1, recommended for tentative approval. Is the applicant present? Are you to agree with staff recommendations? Applicant is present and in agreement. Is there anyone else here to speak for this? Anyone here to speak against? Thank you. Item number 5, 3553 Short Van Loo Road, Max subdivision, recommended for tentative approval. Is the applicant present? Are you in agreement with staff recommendations? Applicant is present and in agreement. Is there anyone else here to speak for this? Anyone here to speak against? Thank you. Item number 6, West Side Hunters Ridge Drive West, Redland subdivision, Phase 3, recommended for tentative approval. Is the applicant present? Are you in agreement with staff recommendations? Applicant is present and in agreement. Is there anyone else here to speak for this? Anyone here to speak against? Thank you. New sidewalk waiver application, 3025 Halls Mill Road and 2801, 2950 Les Lane. This waiver is recommended for approval. Is the applicant present? Anyone here to speak for this? Anyone here to speak against? Thank you. New rezoning application, 4620 Benton Spur Road, JBC Enterprises. It's recommended for tentative approval. Is the applicant present? Are you in agreement with staff recommendations? Applicant is present and in agreement. Is there anyone else here to speak for this? Anyone here to speak against?
Mr. Chairman, as we approach this, I just want to bring the commission's attention to the email that's printed.
Thank you. My name is Randy Batiste. I live at 4624 Channing Court, Mobile 36608. What you have is a letter that was authored. I didn't author it, but I'm the conduit. And we have 14 houses on our cul-de-sac. 12 of the residents are signed here on the application. And it's not necessarily trying to be obstructive, but there are a lot of things that we don't know about this project. And a lot of things I don't know about ordinances and what they need to comply with. But I've been a resident of this street for almost 25 years. Benton Spur Road is a residential street, if you're not aware of it. A residential street that hasn't really been improved in 50 years. Only about a third of Benton Spur Road has drainage. A small thunder shower in the summer will put 5 to 6 inches of rain on this road. It's not designed for necessarily commercial use. With the growth of E.R. Dixon School across the street from where this lot is located, that school has tripled in size over the last 30 years. So the amount of traffic that's spilled onto Benton Spur during the high traffic areas of the morning and the afternoon make it even difficult for us now to exit and enter the street. Throwing another commercial business into the mix will just increase the demand. With 20 years worth of medical experience in being around medical offices and complexes, when parking lots fill up, patients find places to park. Currently already, we have people who don't want to go through the carpool line at E.R. Dixon that park on our street and wait for their kids to come out. Patients will do the same thing. Things that we don't know, and we may not have a right to know, but I think we do. What kind of structure? Is it going to be a leased piece of property or an owner-occupied property? Landscape design, we've seen no landscape design. Whoever's purchasing the property has not reached out to the neighborhood to ask for suggestions or options available. We don't know anything about any hardscape barriers, style of building. We don't know anything about a parking plan. We don't know what their estimate patient load might be in that area. Basically, what we're coming down to is we all say we want neighborhoods and we want them to be walkable. Benton Spur is going to be getting walks on the north side, supposedly any now. I think the contract's been let, but hopefully that'll start soon. We want this to be a neighborhood that can be walkable and can be enjoyed by all, but the commercial creep that encroaches on neighborhoods these days continues to march on. We also have a lot on the east side of our street that faces Benton Spur Road that has a residential house on it. What's to keep it from going commercial as well? Where do you draw the line? Where do you stop it? This lot actually comes into our street 150 feet into our street. So the first two houses in our neighborhoods are going to be looking at the parking lot of this building. It's not what we signed up for when we bought, our houses at different times. The aesthetic value of the property could be impacted. Oh, wrap up. The aesthetic value, property values, and everything else can be impacted by, what transpires here. We're not necessarily against the project in total. How do you vote for or against something when you don't know anything about it? That's the biggest issue. But I can tell you that all of the residents that signed the letter are against the rezoning project. I'm done.
Thank you, sir. Any questions by commissioners?
Do we know if it's in fact a medical use? I think the staff report just said office. Okay, but it's B1, so they're really not required to know. Nick, before you walked in, Mr. Batiste, one of his points of interest was drainage in that area. I know this is just a conceptual plan, but can you kind of just let him know that it would have to be developed in accordance with the stormwater requirements and they'd have to retain their water on site?
That's correct, and if we have areas that we have known flooding problems, we can require a developer to go to a higher development standard. So once it comes into our office, we'll look at the particular site, look at what's taking place around it, and then make them go address the drainage accordingly.
It's an open ditch right off of the road. That's pretty much what it is.
They're not allowed to. They're not allowed to
today.
They're not allowed to increase the drainage. In some cases, we'll make them go to a very extreme design standard if there's known other adjacent drainage issues.
And I'll just kind of I was just going to add one other thing just so you know. So they're not required to submit a full landscape plan with this site, but I believe that 24% of the site will have to be landscaped with 16% of that on the frontage. Bert, I'm off on my numbers, but.
The minimum landscape amount is 12% overall. Of that, 60% has to be between the building and the street frontages.
So no ordinance related to side views.
There currently is nothing in the zoning ordinance, although there would be a requirement for a buffer along the portion of the property that abuts residential, so along the backside, and then the parking lot would have to be screened along Channing Court because it is across the street from a residential use.
And there's no PUD requirement on this application because there's just a single building.
I have a question of the applicant. Do you know if any of your residents contacted your council? Right, I'm asking, right.
Okay, you said the applicant.
No, I said I have a question to ask about.
Okay.
Do you know if any of your residents contacted your council person to ask for a meeting so that you could learn more about the pending?
Not that I'm aware of.
Does that interest you?
Sure.
To have something like that? Because a lot of times that's very valuable for everybody.
Sure.
Mr. Batiste, the property next to this property that's zoned B1 commercial. Has that been residential and been rezoned also since y'all been living in the area?
The one that's to the west of it?
Yes, there's
Yes, it was.
several
Well,
B1 office
I don't know
sites.
if it, I think it had been rezoned at an earlier time period and was not developed. I think it was developed at a later time. I don't know when the rezoning on that piece of property occurred.
And the land on the front of Channing Court that we're talking about today, has that been for sale as a residential lot up until now, or was it marketed that way?
It was first of all, we tried to buy it. The lady had a design on the house, on the property, put as many as 4 houses on the property. Then she actually ended up selling it to a caterer who was going to use the business as a catering business, but without knowing that it wasn't zoned for that purpose. So he placed the product for sale, and then it was purchased by whatever the Enterprises LLC business is. It was marketed for a little while as a residential lot, but not for a long period of time.
Okay.
Mr. Atchison, to answer your question, the most recent rezoning to B1 in this stretch was in 1995.
I bought my house on January the 1st of 1994.
Margaret, I guess the staff recommends for approval. So he asked about a kind of national, a dividing line, draw the line. Did you just kind of view Channing Drive as being that eastern zoning boundary, so everything else back to the west was?
Streets are logical demarcations between zoning districts.
Okay.
So that was one of the elements that went into the recommendation.
Okay,
and it's adjoining B1 to the west, and B1 is a buffer business district, which if you're going to have commercial and residential, that is the lowest level of commercial available.
Well, I wonder if the meeting between maybe the city council member or the enterprise with the homeowners could maybe change, not having the parking lot right there on the corner of your neighborhood and maybe having the building. I don't know what the reasons for the layout are, if there's any reasons for reasons not to be able to change it, but you know, if you weren't staring into the parking lot necessarily, but maybe there was, you know, the building there and the parking was on the other side of the site. I don't know if the commission has that ability to request that, but that's just something I'm bringing up in case there are.
I surmise that most people don't show up for these things, and probably a lot of objections come after the fact. So this is really sort of the first time I've ever really objected to a project or something that's progressive. But just by the virtue of that drawing, which I've seen for the first time, when I thought about buying the property, I went to 6 of my neighbors and said, what would you think if I bought the property and divided it into 2 lots and emptied onto our street and included into our neighborhood? But, not that I'm anything special, but I did want to consult with those people, and I would think that anybody that wanted to have a change to the neighborhood would have made that offer in the beginning. Many of the patients that will be coming to this office, and I don't mean to be age discriminatory because I'm reaching that level myself, but a lot of people mistake brakes and accelerators, and that parking design has parking places that back up to Ms. Picar's house, and a wooden fence is not much of a barrier for a 6,000-pound vehicle.
Well, I think what Ms. Denon, and again, so just as a zoning application is not site plan specific, but I do agree with her, maybe if the building was positioned more like a residential in nature, so it was maybe centered on the lot or closer to the corner, than if the parking was behind the building, it would be less visible, you know, for every time you're entering your street. But that parking would have to go behind the building, or you can have a sea of asphalt in front of the building. So
it's a trade-off.
Again, but it's not site plan specific, but maybe a meeting with the developer and some compromise on the site plan. Not that I'm saying it's going to be approved, I'm just offering
understand.
suggestions.
Issue is I travel a lot. I haven't had much of an opportunity to meet with a council member or even try and attempt them to make a meeting. We have a lot of small children on our street. We have a lot of new mothers. They're quite busy and otherwise occupied. So I got designated as the one because I had the time today, you know, to be down here. Other people are taking care of their mother who had oral surgery today. Like I said, we've had 3 new births on the street, so everybody's pretty busy. So I
Is
got
the applicant, resident, for the representative for the applicant here today?
no idea.
The engineer, is it appropriate if we just kind of ask him if he nod his head if it's a medical use to give the neighborhood some, so he at least knows that?
Can I suggest that when we see a zoning change that's now a business, abutting a residential, it is very helpful, not only to the council member who will be responsible for the ultimate decision that happens here, that this rest for the next planning commission so that this group has that opportunity to meet and not just at this public hearing to make a decision that this building will shift or that it will be a masonry wall, because we can't do that. But by bringing the parties together, this can be discussed and these things could be accomplished at a meeting. I don't know what the timeline is for the applicant, but again, it's not a planned unit development, so I get that. But these people are now going to have a business if it moves forward in that direction. So the opportunity to sit with the owner or the owner's representative is extremely important. I know we're not into new codes, but I understand that that was a goal of the planning staff, was to allow people to meet prior to these public hearings where, you know, things are more stressful. You do this in a relaxed environment. I think, I know that my office has done this, and I believe in speaking for my colleagues, they appreciate that kind of opportunity. So if we can maybe look at a 2-week holdover, which I will make that recommendation when we get there, that gives them the chance to sit down. So that way there could be a greater understanding of what they can expect, and they'll be prepared either way. But just looking at these drawings now, obviously we're hearing this is the first time, and this is a change in zoning, so there's going to be a change in character that they'll have to adjust to. Give them an opportunity to try to mitigate it as best they can.
I will also say, Mr. Batiste, that the city often works with the residents to put no parking signs along Central Street to stop that bleed over. They just, a couple of weeks ago, talked to one of the applicants about that. Gotcha. So you can work with the city on that.
Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else here to speak against? Does the applicant wish to respond?
Where's the
Bobby McBride, Rowe Engineering. We weren't hired to do any site-specific design at this point. This is simply just a conceptual plan for rezoning. I'm sure if we're hired, we'll get down to the details of designing the site, which means we will apply to the city engineering. All the standards, all the zoning standards will be met. But we're not that far along at this point. I'm not sure the client even has plans that far down the road yet. I think the meet's probably a good idea to let the client and the neighbors in the area there sort of get on the same page and see what they want to do. But of course, you know, if we are hired to do design, any buffering, zoning, parking requirements, landscaping, we're for that. We do it every day. We know what to turn in and how to do it. So we work with the city on drainage. So those are all things that we advise our clients on when we take on a job like this. If the commission today decides to hold it over, we can talk to our client. I would make sure we let them understand what happened here today and let them proceed, maybe get in touch with the property owners there and set up meetings.
Mr. McBride, our next meeting is scheduled for November the 15th. Do you think that gives you enough time for the developer and or do you think a 2-meeting holdover would be better?
I can't speak to my client, but I don't see why they couldn't do it in a couple of weeks if they can get all the residents in the area together.
What is our date on our December meeting? December 6th. Thank you, Ms. Pappas. Thank you,
Chairman,
Mr. McBride.
I would say when you do make a resubmittal, that you do show, maybe not the fully designed retention facilities, but those can drastically change your site plan and green space where they're positioned, and so that is just helpful to this, if we know in generalities where you're planning to put it and the shape and the size of it.
Okay.
Yes, sir.
Thank you.
New planning approval applications, number 9, 59, and 63 East Drive, Islamic Society of Mobile. Recommended for approval. Is the applicant present? Okay. Are you in agreement with staff recommendations?
Yes.
Okay. Do you have anything else you wish to add? Okay, thank you. Is there anyone else here to speak for this? Anyone here to speak against?
Good afternoon. My name is Brian Lee. I reside at 300 Trent Mill Court in Ridgefield subdivision. With the chair's permission, I'd like to use some of my time. The neighbor next door, the abutting neighbor, is not to be here due to health reasons, and she asked me to deliver a message if that's okay with the chair. Miss Diane Howard, who lives at 99 East Drive, reviewed the staff report, and many of y'all might recall from the previous meetings regarding this, she's the lady that is in the wheelchair, so she's always at the top. She reviewed the site plan, and she was a little bit dismayed to find out that there's no setback on the southern boundary. She was of the understanding that there was supposed to be a setback. I wasn't privileged to any of the conversation between the staff and her because I know they had to go up and accommodate her. But she did send an email to the city, and she asked for copies to be made available to all the commissioners. I hope you got it, so I think it speaks for itself. So I told her with permission that I would deliver that message. Now on to the message that I would like to share with everybody after talking with a lot of the neighbors. To be honest, we were kind of excited to see the buildings, the older buildings, finally start to come down because we knew that that was bringing the end of this very long, years-long project that's just been dragging on, to be quite honest. It's had quite an impact in the neighborhood. They had 30 days, as was originally noted in the original PUD, once the temporary occupancy was made available to them to finish the project out. According to the staff report, on the 20th of September this year, they realized they weren't going to get the work done, so they went ahead and applied for this additional, I think I'm correct in saying, a PUD to be able to allow to continue. The staff estimated that the work could be completed by the end of 2018. Today's November 1, talking 60 days. We're talking double the time from the original time frame, but we're also talking half of the project. So this just makes zero sense to anybody in the neighborhood. Why we're going to double the time, and they've actually had the 30 days because they've been continuing to work on it. They've been working on it as of yesterday. They did miss quite a lot of days with some really beautiful weather out there that you could do this type of work. But anyway, we basically stand in opposition to the extension that's going to drag it through the Christmas season, is the bottom line. It's going to drag on to the holidays. I think it would be very reasonable if we gave them 30 days. We do want to see the project done. And as I said, they have 50% of the workload left to do, and 30 days to accomplish that would be reasonable, and that would be the request we would make at the commission. Thank you. Thank you.
Any questions or comments from our commissioners?
Does staff have a comment about the 10-foot setback on the southern boundary?
The setbacks for a building, as depicted on the site plan, and this is a planning approval, so it is site plan specific, parking's allowed in the setback, and parking what is proposed along with the 6-foot privacy fence. This is the same as it was with the prior approvals.
The number of parking spaces that we have here meets the requirement as well, correct?
Do you want to get into that?
The parking as proposed, once it's completed, will meet the minimum required. And that was one of the concerns, is for having just a 30-day turnaround from the issuance of the temporary certificate of occupancy and the final, was to make sure that there would be as short a period as possible where there may not be sufficient parking on site while they finish demolishing all the buildings and installing the new parking.
I have a question. It shows an exercise sports hard surface. Could that become parking at least as far back as Ms. Howard's home so that she can at least get some of the setback?
Well, that would require them to revise their site plan. I don't know if their stormwater detention pond was designed to accommodate that or not. It perhaps is, but I don't know that they're going to build that surface area. When I went past the site, I think it was last week, it did not appear there was anything in terms of hardscape proposed in that area, or at least under construction. It looked like it was all grassed in.
It's a wooden privacy fence, right?
Yes.
So headlights and everything usually shine through because there's no trees, there's no buffer. Just looking at this, it's right up to the property line, and that's allowed, you said so. Do you think a masonry wall would be something, did you contemplate that would be something that would be better for someone who is so closely abutting in their single-family residential property?
Well, if you're concerned about the light bleed through the fence because of headlights, a shadow box fence where you have 2 sets of boards would perhaps be less expensive than a masonry wall. And if there are trees along the property line, especially on the Ms. Howard side, a masonry wall might be detrimental to the root system of those trees, whereas a fence would be better for the health of those trees.
So you're saying to say the type of fence that would prevent the
I think
there are, I imagine, night and evening activities at the mosque.
Well, I believe rather than a standard wooden fence, which would just have one set of boards with a small gap in between each board, if you had, I think it's called a shadow box.
Okay, and the city would watch that be built appropriately so that it did meet?
Well, you would make a condition of this approval, and we would require the applicant to put that type of fence in. So if the boards overlap sufficiently, there shouldn't be any direct light going through.
The lights.
There shouldn't be any direct light going through.
Because all the other areas got a buffer, got at least 10, and Allen Drive got pretty significant buffer, 15 feet, right? It says 15 City of Mobile. What is that? Just curious.
Well, Allen Drive is a substandard right-of-way, so they actually have to dedicate right-of-way along there. Then there's a 5-foot minimum building setback.
Should that street ever be developed?
Right. So there's a distance between the building and the street. They could have also put parking in that area as well. However, the east corner is where they have their detention facility.
Another question for staff. I guess trying to make sure I understand the purpose of this application. Is the only thing that's really changing is that length of time where that previous comment or condition was the 30 days? It's really just lengthening that?
Yes.
I think I, for one, would like to hear from the applicant to say, is the contractor engaged? Does he have, is that a realistic expectation from him? I think I think the others on the commission probably want to hear that as well.
Yeah, I agree. And while he's come down, maybe I have a question. When they exceeded their 30 days, were they legally required to stop work before they applied for an extension? And is that why we've suggested 60 days now? Because if they didn't complete in 30 days again, they'd have to stop apply for an extension again and start again?
Well, the temporary CO that was issued, I think, was given 60 or 90 days. So through the building permit process, they have a temporary CO to occupy their building.
To the end of December.
And then because they submitted their planning approval application prior to the deadline for planning commission requirements, that allows them to continue to work on improving the site until they have a decision from the planning commission. And then you will set the time frame that they have to complete site work. But Mr. Hamami is here if you wish to ask him direct questions about completing it.
They got their CO in August, on August the 24th. correct?
Temporary, yes.
And that was supposed to be a 30-day window of opportunity, correct?
The temporary CO is a function of the building code, and the time period granted on that temporary CO per the building code was 90 days. However, planning specifically noted compliance with all of the requirements within 30 days. And when they realized they were not going to be able to comply with all of these site improvements, that is when they filed this application to ask for more time to complete these improvements.
Okay, so technically, when they got their CO, they had till September 24th to have everything
For
completed.
planning commission compliance.
But they were aware of this, correct?
Yes,
Because
ma'am.
they following their guidance from the city. And here we are, November, and you want to give them to the end of this year.
Recommendation.
Technically, they can continue the construction project, they just can't inhabit the building.
No, they're in the building.
They are in the building. There is no other habitable building on that site at this point.
But expiration of CO means that they can't inhabit the building, but it does
Unless
not
it-
mean that they have to stop the work on the site.
That's correct.
Thank you.
So, wait.
Could the applicant at least come down, because they're making a lot of decisions for them without them having an opportunity to speak? Yes, sir.
So they're not in their mosque today, is what you're saying?
They are.
They are in there and they are operating the
Yeah,
school.
yeah.
Yes.
That's incorrect. I thought he just said they're not allowed to be.
No, the discussion made it sound like if the time expired, that nothing could happen. And I was saying that the condition can continue, they just would not be able to continue having service at the mosque if it expires.
Correct.
Well, it technically has, but they,
Hi, my name is Shafiq Hamami, President of the Islamic Society of Bill at 63 East Drive. I'm here today just to ask for a small extension of time because we had some problems with the weather, inclement weather, that we could not work in some period of time because of the hurricanes and different times we couldn't work. And also we had some problems with contractors. Most of the contractors during the hurricane times, they left to Florida and to Texas, and we couldn't get people to come to work and do finish the work. So that what pushed us to the deadline. And even then, we are almost done. We have the fire department approval, we got the elevator approval, elevator inspection approval, and we have the driveways almost finished. Well, they are finished. We just need to call for inspection. The detention pond is done. The parking, paving of the parking is about 75% complete. And we have the lighting done. All that done since the CO, since we got the CO. We got the trees planted according to the plans. The only thing we have is about 25% left of the parking, 25% of the paving to be done, and put up a fence in the north side of the property. And just a few minor things in case some requirements from the inspectors that we don't know about. But we only need a small extension of time, and we should have been finished by now. I wouldn't even be here asking for an extension if we didn't have that couple of problems with the weather, mainly. So that's the only thing. I'm just asking for as much time that you can give us to finish the work, and we will call for the inspections hopefully by next week or two, and we'll be finished.
Mr. Hamami, how much time do you realistically think it'll take you need to be able to finish things up?
I can do the work if there's no delays from the weather delays, for example, or the contractors don't just lay out on me. The work shouldn't take more than a month. 30 days will be enough to finish it. I'm just hope that if you give me extra time, just so I don't have to come back here again in case the weather turns bad on me.
I think that's incredibly reasonable. Being in construction, I mean, especially with inspections from the city and different things, it can be really easy to, I mean, 30 days in the construction world could go like that, and ask him to come down again. It's in their best interest to finish and get a CO opposed to dragging on in the construction process.
I would love to finish it next week, and that'll be the end of it.
Well, this is approved, it'll give you to December 31st, so that should give you plenty of time.
Oh, yes.
Are you agreeable to doing a shadow box fence on the south, I think it was the south property line, where it abuts the residential property?
I don't know which side of it.
Don, I mean, I don't, in my opinion, a shadow box, what I think of is a privacy fence and on each opposite side. So I don't see how that's going to provide any additional screening, especially if the cars are parked at an angle, then the light's going to kind of go through that portion of the shadow box. They're not tapered or closed off, so I don't see how that's going to do any good, in my opinion. I mean, Bert, I know it was your suggestion. I apologize. I just don't see, if it was boarded up on both sides, maybe, but
That's what a shadow box is.
no, a shadow box is every other side.
Opposite sides, so it gives you blockage. It doesn't let the light penetrate.
The cracks.
Right.
But there's a gap in between.
It's really not that much more expensive to do the shadow box, so.
Mr. Hamam, have y'all erected your fence already along the south side?
The fence is existing. It's been there for 30 years. We're not doing anything to the fence. And
You had no plans to replace that fence?
There was no complaint about it before, and it's been approved as is. We never had to discuss this before.
Mr. Chairman, Mr. Hamami, was there parking on the south side of the property in the past?
I'm calling the right side.
This right here.
Miss Howard's
Is there a
home.
fence right here?
Yes, it's existing. It's been
His
there.
question was there parking in the past in that area?
Oh, yes.
facing the fence?
Oh, yes, always.
Okay,
30
thank you.
years. It's never
There were
changed.
trees there. It's
And
a
there's
clear
a
tree.
lot of trees on that side.
Yeah, they were cleared off.
Mr. Chairman, much like my fellow commissioner here, I understand the challenges of getting a paving contractor to come in and mobilize on a job. So is it correct for us to understand that your paving contractor is under contract, he just hasn't mobilized back to the job to finish?
He's already working.
So he's actively working?
He's actively working.
Okay.
I mean, he lacked maybe a couple of days to finish the paving.
Okay.
And then we have to wait 14 days for it to cure before we put the striping.
Okay.
And that's basically it, besides putting up the fence in the north side of the property, where there's a chain link fence now.
Okay.
When did you start building the facility? Is it 2.5 years now?
2 years, almost 2 years.
I thought it was April. 2016.
I think they're 30 days away from being finished. They're asking for an extension till the end of this year. I honestly don't even know why we're continuing this discussion. I mean, we can go on, but I mean, we've all done construction projects. It's all taken twice as long as we've expected. Why are we continuing this with him? What's the purpose? Are we going to tell him he can't have another 30 days?
On this particular planning approval that you're working off of, was that done administratively? Was there a public hearing for it?
Planning approvals are not done administratively. There was an administrative planning and development to accommodate the placement of the temporary classroom building on the site so that they could demolish the old classroom building and another building on the property so that they could build the new building. So that was the only issue or only item done administratively. This is a planning approval can only be done by the Planning Commission, and this one exists from 2014.
2014?
Yes.
Any other comments, questions by commissioners? Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Item number 10, 721 Oak Circle Drive West, American Tower Corporation. Recommended for approval. Is the applicant present?
Yes, sir.
Are you in agreement with staff recommendations?
Yes, sir.
Applicant is present in agreement. Is there anyone else here to speak for this? Anyone here to speak against? Thank you. Unless you had something you just are itching to say. Okay. That was our last item. We will now go into deliberation session. Item number 1 was withdrawn. Item number 2, Sheldon Place subdivision, recommended for tentative approval. Is there a motion?
Move to approve based on staff recommendations.
Second.
Properly moved and seconded. Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Item passes. Item number 3, 213, 219 Dolphin Street, 208 Conti, the Woolworth Building, recommended tentative approval. Is there a motion?
I move we approve, subject to staff recommendations.
Second.
Properly moved and seconded. Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Item passes. Item number 4, Skyview Point subdivision, re-subdivision of Lot 1, recommended for tentative approval. Is there a motion?
I'll move to approve based on staff recommendations.
Second.
Properly moved and seconded. Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Item passes. Item number 5, 3553 Short Van Loo Road, recommended for tentative approval. Is there a motion?
Move to approve based on staff recommendations.
Second.
Properly moved and seconded. Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Items pass. Item number 6, Redland Subdivision Phase 3, recommended for tentative approval. Is there a motion?
I move we approve, subject to staff recommendations.
Second.
Properly moved and seconded. Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Item passes. New sidewalk waiver application, 3725 Halls Mill Road and 2801, 2951 Les Lane. Waiver is recommended for approval. Is there a motion?
Move to approve and grant the waiver.
Second.
Properly moved and seconded. Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Item passes. Item number 8, 4620 Benton Spur Road. It's recommended for approval. Is there a motion?
I'll make a motion for a holdover until December 6th.
Second.
Properly moved and seconded for a holdover until the December 6th meeting. Is there any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Item passes. Items held over to our December 6th meeting. New planning approval applications. Item number 9, 59 and 63 East Drive, Islamic Society of Mobiles, recommended for approval. Is there a motion?
Move to approve, subject to staff recommendation.
Second.
Properly moved and seconded. Any discussion?
Yes. On that one, if you look at the site map, there used to be a lot of trees, and the property that's the applicant, along with a building that's out there that now everything's completely cleared off. And I don't know the condition of the fence, and I don't know whether that was the fence original to this initial site as a home, because it's still R1. So the age of the fence, this is a brand new development, and I think asking for the shadow box type fence that the applicant is responsible for on this development would, at least as far back as the R1 goes, the other is apartment complex that's been there a long time. Maybe they're not as sensitive to having, you know, that type of development. I know Ms. Howard, she would be here today. She also contacted my office. She's dealing with a health issue, or she would have been here. And if this planning commission would at least consider the type of fence that would be a new product and would at least protect that light coming through from the headlights, because that's exactly what's going to be coming in and out of there, angled into their parking lot there, which was not the configuration prior. And going back to 2014, she really was under the impression that she was looking at least a buffer too, not just the parking right at her property line. So if that could be considered as part of this, since we are looking at the application, I would like to suggest that this commission give great consideration to that as part of this extension that's so being granted.
Any other
So I'll
discussion?
take that as a motion to add the shadow box fencing as far back on, I guess, she's on the north side, the south, okay. And as far back as her residential property line.
I mean, they said they already have privacy fence up, but I mean, I guess we haven't inspected that, but they're going to ask for a 30-day extension on construction, and we're going to make them.
It's more than a 30-day.
Well, if it was 60 or 90, I just don't see the point of making them take down a fence if it meets the requirements.
I have to be of the opinion that that should have, I mean, if that was the desire of this commission, it should have been taken up when the issue came before us before. I mean, you've got an applicant that's in the midst of construction, and just going back in and adding things, I just don't feel is appropriate. I mean, what if we were asking him to reconfigure parking? I mean, just, you know, I just don't think that's appropriate. So I will not be accepting that addition to my motion.
We currently have a motion on the floor. Any further discussion?
Has staff examined the fence there now, just to have a general idea about the condition of the current fence?
I have a photo of it here. You can't see it very well, but it is aged. So, you know, putting in a new fence would allow you to add additional boards so that you would block most of the light that would come through. That you would block mostly the direct shining of cars.
Yeah. Now, I agree with John and Nick. I mean, we've already approved the PUD back, you know, whenever we did this, and we addressed all that then. But now that all this has been cleared, I do understand Ms. Rich's concern for her constituent in that area living right next door to it. We're not asking a lot, just to have a good fence in good condition to try to block some of the light pollution coming from the parking cars over into her house. So that's just sort of a good neighbor thing to do, I would think. So,
Mr. Chairman, Bert, you said the fence was aged. Is it in a state of particular disrepair?
I didn't look at that closely, and the photographs that I have are not close enough for me to be able to see if it is in a state of disrepair. doesn't appear to be, but I would have to go back and check it again.
But
And-
to your recollection, it's not falling
No.
over or anything like that?
And if it were in a state of disrepair, such as missing boards or missing sections or falling over, we do our site inspection, we
Right.
would require the fence to be restored
Right.
to a minimum privacy fence.
Okay,
standard.
thank you. That's where I was going with that. Perfect.
Any further discussion? Currently, the active motion is to accept the application as submitted. And that's what the vote will be on. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Item passes. Item number 10, 721 Oak Circle Drive, American Tire Corporation. It's recommended for tentative approval, and facts are presented for finding. Is there a motion?
Move to approve based on staff recommendations.
Second.
We need the finding of facts on this one, correct?
It's just,
Okay.
I'll make a motion of subject to staff recommendations and finding of facts A, B, and C.
Second.
Properly moved and seconded. Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Item passes. Thank you. Is there any other business?
No, sir.
All right. Thank you. Meeting adjourned.
That was too much to start with. I mean, she should have 90 days to do that. Oh, yeah, it's just a church.